From sea to trade across the land, Kirchner's legacy we understand. Global data, insights wide, for research strong, with Kirchner by your side. For research strong, with Kirchner by your side.
Hey, Dutt, thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course.
Are you right now at Purdue University at the beautiful campus?
Yes, I am.
Lucky you. That's very nice. All right, let me give a short introduction so that everyone knows who I'm talking to.
Yes.
So you're at Dutt Thakkar and you're at Purdue University. You're working at the Dauch Center for the Management of Manufacturing Enterprises, and you also work with the Global Supply Chain Management Initiative.
Yes.
And your main areas of focus are global trade, supply chain management, operations management, and manufacturing processes. Is that right?
That's right.
All right, cool. And your research covers global trade, logistics, and you also cooperate with your students on further research, right?
Yes. We also do some regional economic analysis and look at the overall supply chain.
Okay, cool. And you're right now working at the Mitchell E. Daniels Junior School of Business, right?
Yes, that's right.
Nice. All right. So Purdue bought the U.S. import records for 2014 all the way through to 2023.
Yes.
And so there, the first question that comes to mind is that's a huge amount of data. That's over 70 million records. That falls in the realms of big data.
Yes.
How do you navigate through such a large data set?
Right. So, I mean, yeah, it was really useful and important to look at all of those imports that are coming in the US. So, we bought starting 2014 to gradually getting for each and every year. And like you said, it is a large data set that falls in the big data realm. So it is not very easy and sometimes challenging to work with such a large data set. We have mainly used Python to sort and organize through the data, and then we've actually stored or used MySQL Workbench and using SQL queries to extract the data, query the data, and basically just use that entire data set.
Wow, that means you pretty much coded it yourself instead of using a finished software for that.
Yes.
That's impressive. And what kind of research have you conducted with Kirchner's data? Yeah, and
So,
sorry,
yeah.
go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah. So to answer your question, with Kirchner's data, we have looked at a lot of industry trends and where so the main data or the data point is the HS code, which identifies and determines which commodity we're looking at for the import trades. So we were able to use that and identify the trends in imports for the different industries in different regions, specifically focusing on the industries and the companies in Indiana, since Purdue is located in West Lafayette, Indiana. So and there were, I think, a lot of other data points which allowed us to take a look at the unloading ports, or where are all of these imports coming to which coast and which region of the US, and then specifically using the address for consignees and the notified parties, we were able to identify which to the level of counties as to okay, which regions in Indiana or which counties are sourcing which commodities through imports, and what kind of other prospects or opportunities are available in other counties or other parts of the state. So basically looking at a lot of the economic regional development.
Oh, it's impressive how you went from this broad data set into this super small niche.
Yes.
And when you narrowed it down that far, like how much data was actually left?
So I think we were, I think we would say about looking specifically for Indiana, it was about 20 to 30%. But then I think that's just one sort of it, because we do also take a look at the other supply chain. Once we drill down the industries, we go back to the national level and see where those industries are prominent in other regions as well,
Okay.
and see what kind of trade activities we can see for goods that are moved from other regions to Indiana, from Indiana to other regions, and just looking at the overall. So yeah, I mean, for looking at Indiana, it was we were able to drill down to 20-30% of the data, but then going back to the entire national level, we're still using all of the data.
Okay. Then another question is, like, how statistically significant were the results? Like, did you have enough data for these results, and how does it compare working with this data set compared to other data sets in the sense of how strong the result is, how clear the evidence is?
Right. So there are a lot of moving parts to trade and the economic analysis, right? So we have the domestic trade, we have the import trade, export trade. So what we were able to do with this analysis is we were able to look at in tandem as to the entire economic analysis and the trade, how is it impacted by domestic flows, how it is impacted by the imports, and since there are a lot of imports coming in the US and each state, so the data was quite helpful in terms of looking at what are the industries that are moving ahead in imports, or where do we see a downtrend of imports and more domestic movement, especially with some of the upcoming and accelerating industries like EV and semiconductors, which are just at the forefront of technology right now.
Wow, yeah. Can you share any student stories or experiences of you or students related to Kirchner's data?
Right. So regarding students, yes, I mean, we work with a lot of students being part of the university, and especially with students that have not worked in a corporate environment, working with such a large data set, it comes as a surprise. And first they're overwhelmed. Okay, there's 70 million records ranging from 2014 to 2023. So to begin with, it's a little overwhelming for them, but when we start putting into focus okay, what our research area is, what our needs are, and once they start working with the data, I think they get more acquainted, and then they're really excited to see what results and what outcomes come out of that, especially with some of the things that they're like, oh, we didn't know this was being imported in the US, or this was the actual scenario. So yeah, it's been fun and a learning experience for the students.
I suppose it must be like you said, quite overwhelming when first opening. Like if you double click on one of these files, you just see these huge amounts of data points.
Exactly. And I mean, yeah. So just opening the files, if you open in Excel, you won't even be able to see all the records. So I mean, they're like, okay, we've never seen something like this that Excel cannot handle. So it's we're using Power Queries and SQL database. So yeah, it's learning experience for them.
And for the students, how do they even begin? Because it's such a it's so much data that actually narrowing it down to understanding where to even start to understand what this kind of data is. How did you start to explain it to the students?
Right. So I think to begin with, what we as the students was to get familiar with, first of all, HS codes, which define the commodities, right? Once they know okay, HS code is the main thing that we are gonna work with to understand what how do we identify the commodities, how do we categorize them into different industries. Then they started making sure they are familiar with running the queries to find specific data, specific information, grouping it by year or by country or by state if you're querying for a specific state. So that's a process that we use, taking it step by step, making sure they get familiar with the data and in that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like I heard a lot of people just start by typing in one HS code and a time frame, for example, 2022, and then see how many imports there were. And I feel like that's a good first step to get familiar with the data.
Yes.
But hearing your story that you work with seeing the different ports and like you really went down into the really small details. That's amazing.
Yes,
And
yes. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like you said, once we identify the HS codes, we look at the trend of how it's being imported or being moved across a specific time frame, a year, and then we look at across multiple years to see the actual trend over the years as to, okay, how is it being impacted? What is the demand in the US of that specific commodity? And then what is the global supply to the US for it? So
just
it's really interesting. Yes.
out of curiosity, have you ever tried or worked trying to make forecasts? Because I noticed that with the data, you sometimes have these curves, which are over quite big periods of time, and you can project them out. Have you tried that too?
At least as of right now, we have not done any forecasting with the import data, especially because of COVID.
Oh yeah,
That really skewed the data where if you're looking at
extremely.
just the general trends, if there was no 2020 COVID impacted activities, it would have been much easier to forecast across 7-10 years. But with COVID, it was really difficult with it actually really skewing the entire data set where the imports and the entire global supply chain went just down. It was something that we have to factor out or treat it as an outlier for to forecast, but we haven't done any forecasting yet.
True, that's very much the same thing I'm experiencing. Like it is really hard to calculate how much of the impact was COVID when
Right.
something is changing and how much was it the like normal market. Like we
Yes.
use it quite often also for sourcing, and then we see that some factories or suppliers are like going up, like having more and more customers, and some others are dropping customers. So it's like I found this forecasting quite interesting. But another question I have. Like, do you have any specific new insights that you can share, like something interesting that you found?
So from the top of my head, we were, like I said, we were doing a lot of regional economic analysis. So we were able to understand what the trends are of the commodities that are moving and specifically being imported in Indiana and specific regions. So I think for certain parts of it, we're able to identify which specific industries are seeing a growth in movement of commodities, and then just in tandem looking at the trade activities domestically of how the goods or commodities are moving just within US, and looking at specifically looking at the EV industry, and how we don't have any specific raw materials or mining in the US. So a lot of it is just being imported from outside the US.
Okay, oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
How does Kirchner's data compare to other data sets you've worked with?
Right. So Kirchner's data set is quite in depth, and it helps us identify each and every import record, where we are able to track starting from which shipper it's coming from in which country, and then which unloading port and loading port, to the detail of which consignee in which address. So we're actually able to track the entire supply chain with starting from the supplier's address, supplier's facility to the consignee's facility. Now, again, working with the entire a huge amount of data, it's challenging. You have to organize it. You need to sort it and make sure that it is serving your specific needs. But
Mhm.
that's like, working with every large data set. But overall, like, it's quite insightful.
Okay, cool. Are there any specific success stories or like notable moments from your students?
So notable moments from our students, like, like I said earlier, right, that at first, like, they are quite overwhelmed to, like, look at this large data set. And then once they start, like, diving into it, they are, like, really excited to see what they can work with. One of the things, right, that we've also used is, like, since we have the consignee addresses, what we've had to do is, like, to identify which state those addresses or those import records belong to. We've had to, like, use Google API to make calls and identify where those addresses actually belong to in which state, because again, it's an entire full address. So it's important to, like, drill down the exact state it's coming to. So once we were able to do that using Google API, like, it took us some time to develop that script to, like, feed the entire import records and just get out of it what specific state it's coming to. The students were really excited to, like, okay, they were able to track it down at the state level and then get the analysis of, like, okay, what records, what commodities are coming to which state, and, like, just looking at the results.
Yeah, that's something I really like about the data too, that you've got both the very broad picture, but also like you can go really narrow down to individual companies.
Exactly. Right.
Um, what kind of impact did Kirchner's data have on your research and the students' research and generally the Dauch Center for Management of Manufacturing Enterprises?
Right. So yeah, I mean, the Dauch Center, like, we are working a lot with, like, the supply chain and manufacturing and, like, the operations. So especially with, like, how the COVID has impacted the global trade, like, a lot of companies, like, a lot of the entire US, it's right now focusing on, like, reshoring and, like, looking at more than one sources for suppliers. So it's actually helped us identify, like, okay, what are the major commodities that are being imported versus, like, produced and moved domestically, and how can we use that information for, like, identifying opportunities of growth, or opportunities that are available within a specific region, and how can they identify, okay, what company or what region is importing specific kinds of commodities, if what are the risks associated with it coming from different parts of the world or different regions, especially with, like, all the different things that are ongoing with global supply chain.
Okay, great. And would you recommend Kirchner's data to other researchers? And if so, what would be the main reasons?
Right. So absolutely, we would definitely recommend Kirchner's data to, like, other people and, like, other organizations. It is quite insightful and useful, specifically, like, the way that we've talked. It ranges from the overall view of the entire, like, supply chain of a specific commodity, starting from a shipper to the consignee. But then at the same time, we can use that data set to drill down to the granular level to look at what specific or what region it's coming from. And the data also has a lot of different measures. Like, we can take a look at it in terms of kgs, in terms of pounds, in terms of TEUs. And it has, like, data at the level of date. So it's not like, you're only going to get the annual data or the annual statistics, but you can also drill down to specific month and look at the trend of, like, at each quarter or semi-annual trends. And it's, yeah, it's a very useful data set.
Cool. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
envy you for being at Purdue right now. It's a beautiful university. It must be a nice
Yes.
life there.
Yes. No, it's starting to get cold now. So we're preparing for that.
All right. Cool. Hey, thank you so much again, Dutt, for taking the time.
All right. Of
And
course.
I enjoyed this conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, we are happy to provide our feedback and help Kirchner, and yeah, we've really use the data set to its potential.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you so much. And hope to talk
All
to you
right.
soon.
Thank you, Nicholas. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.